Underneath the sands of Jakku, inside a chamber older than the Empire, a star chart floated above ancient computers, tracing a route through uncharted space. For decades, those machines had been grinding at one problem: how to cross the western half of the galaxy, where probe droids vanished and explorers who returned had lost their minds. Half the galaxy has never been charted, and the reasons go back tens of thousands of years. The story of the unknown regions starts long before the Republic, long before the Jedi. In Legends, the oldest known spacefaring civilization in the galaxy did not come from the core worlds or the Outer Rim. The Rakata were native to a planet called Lehon, deep in the galactic west, inside the same unknown territory that would later earn the name Unknown Regions. They built the first hyperdrives in recorded galactic history. Their method of travel had no parallel in anything that followed. Rakatan ships ran on the dark side of the Force, drawing energy from enslaved Force sensitives held inside machines that converted suffering into fuel. By roughly 35,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Rakata had built an enormous orbital station called the Starforge over their home star. The Starforge was a factory fed by the dark side that produced warships on a scale the galaxy would not see again for millennia. From the unknown regions, the Rakata's infinite empire spread eastward into the known galaxy, conquering every world rich with the Force and enslaving entire populations. Canon confirms the Rakata through galaxy maps in the Force Awakens visual dictionary and a reference in the Andor series to a Quati artifact celebrating an uprising against Rakatan invaders. At its height, the Infinite Empire held hundreds of worlds across both the unknown regions and explored space, bound together by a hyperdrive network that only worked because the Rakata could still touch the Force. Around 25,200 BBY, a plague swept through the Rakata and stripped them of their connection to the Force, the one ability their entire civilization ran on. Without that connection, their technology failed. Hyperdrives died, weapons fed by captive Force sensitives went dark, and the machines holding the Empire together fell silent. On worlds where Rakatan overseers had held populations captive for generations, the guards could no longer power their weapons or call for reinforcement. Across hundreds of conquered worlds, populations the Rakata had held for millennia rose up at once. The Infinite Empire, which had kept order through fear and the threat of being wiped out, came apart within years. The surviving Rakata pulled back to Lehon, where rival factions turned on each other in a war that wrecked what little remained. By roughly 20,000 BBY, the Empire was gone. Scattered tribes survived across the unknown regions in what Legend sources call the Rakatan Archipelago, a loose chain of isolated worlds settled by refugees fleeing the ruin. The most advanced tribes on the planets Tulpa and Makadak recovered fragments of old technology, which were small ships called skip ships, partial orbital factories modeled on the Starforge. Other tribes fared worse. According to the Essential Atlas, some wiped each other out with weapons they no longer knew how to control, turning entire worlds into wastelands. Republic surveyors who later went looking for these settlements came back with nothing. The Rakata were still out there somewhere, but the region had swallowed them whole. One theory offers a reason why the region was so hard to reach in the first place. It describes a chain of hyperspace anomalies called the Tangle, running along the western edge of the galactic disk. The Tangle sits at the midline of a larger shell of turbulence that wraps around the entire galaxy. An Imperial-era researcher compared the galaxy to a spinning top. The outer shell was countless spirals and currents moving too fast to cross safely, and the western barrier was what remained of the string that set it all turning. The leading theory holds that ancient beings called the Celestials built the barrier to contain the Infinite Empire. The Celestials had once ruled over the Rakata as a servant species, and the barrier went up after the Rakata revolted against them. If the theory is right, the unknown regions were not always unreachable. Someone sealed them off on purpose, tens of thousands of years before the Republic tried its first exploration mission, and the seal has frayed but never broken. The first civilization to navigate the unknown regions did so with the Force as its engine. Tens of thousands of years later, every faction that attempted to cross the same space would run into the same wall. The unknown regions demanded the Force to navigate, and no one who held that ability ever saw a reason to hand over the map. The Rakata had tried to master the region with raw power and lost everything. The next civilization to survive inside it would take the opposite approach. Of all the civilizations living inside the unknown regions, one understood its dangers better than any other, and that understanding shaped every part of how it governed and how it fought. The Chiss Ascendancy, introduced in the Canon Ascendancy trilogy, occupies a pocket of relative stability inside the wider region. Governed by 9 ruling families and defended by a military branch called the Expansionary Defense Fleet, the Ascendancy has persisted for thousands of years, a rare feat in a region where most governments are short-lived. The Chiss do not call the space around them the unknown regions. They call it the chaos, and the name is earned. According to Chiss records, or at least Chiss legend, the region was not always impossible to cross. Millennia ago, a series of chain supernova explosions sent enormous masses tumbling between stars at near light speed. Some smashed into asteroids or whole planets, others slammed into new stars and sparked additional supernovas, and the cascade reshaped the region's hyperspace lanes permanently. The debris from all of it, combined with regions of dense electromagnetic interference, warped the local hyperspace lanes into a web that never stopped shifting. Inside the Ascendancy, the lanes are stable enough for routine travel. Outside, the paths rearrange constantly, and a route that was safe last month can tear a ship apart today. In the known galaxy, stable hyperspace lanes create trade. Trade builds wealth, and wealth holds governments together. In the chaos, none of those foundations last long enough to build on. The Chiss left those borders once. During the ancient Sith Wars, they fought in the wider galaxy, a place they referred to as lesser space. They brought back alien artwork, captured technology, and a thorough understanding of what happens when a civilization leaves its doors open. Then they withdrew and sealed the border. The Ascendancy adopted a strict policy: military action only after Chiss territory is attacked first, with preemptive operations forbidden regardless of how severe the threat. Combined with the natural barriers of the chaos, the rule turned the Ascendancy into what one senior officer in the novels described as an island of calm. The same instability that made life outside so dangerous also kept the Ascendancy safe. But the Chiss could not keep invaders out without also keeping their own scouts blind. The Expansionary Defense Fleet existed for exactly this reason, sending patrols into the chaos to identify threats before they reached Chiss space. But even dedicated scout ships struggle with routes that shifted between departure and return. Enemy fleets could build strength in neighboring star systems for years without the Ascendancy knowing. Mapping the chaos from the inside proved almost as hard as mapping it from the outside, and the Chiss solved the problem not with better computers or faster ships, but with children. Chiss Skywalkers are Force-sensitive girls, typically between the ages of 7 and 14, who navigate warships through the chaos using an ability called Third Sight. During a jump, a Skywalker sits at the navigation console, enters a deep trance, and reads the shifting hyperspace lanes in real time, steering the ship through openings no sensor array can detect. The work is physically punishing. Skywalkers suffer overload spells that come with splitting headaches and distorted vision, along with recurring nightmares tied to prolonged navigation. One girl in the Ascendancy trilogy navigated her first ship at 7 and her last at 13, losing her third sight a full year ahead of the normal schedule. Most lose their abilities entirely by their mid-teens, and when a Skywalker's third sight goes dark, her time as a navigator is over. Without a Skywalker, Chiss ships travel jump by jump, which are short, cautious hyperspace hops between confirmed save points, slow enough that any long-range mission through the chaos becomes pointless. Even a trip a Skywalker could handle in hours might take days or weeks by jump, with no guarantee the route will hold together for the return. A warship investigating a disturbance just a few star systems away still needs a Skywalker on board, and the Corps never has enough to go around. The Ascendancy cannot map the chaos because the navigators who cross it are children whose abilities expire, tracing routes that dissolve behind them the moment they pass. The Chiss guard that secret more carefully than any other. When operating alongside outsiders, Chiss warships bring in hired navigators from the Navigators Guild, a commercial service of alien pilots called Pathfinders who sell their skills across the chaos. On joint missions, the Guild Navigator sits at the navigation console in full view of any foreign officers or passengers. The Skywalker and her caregivers stay locked in a private suite where no outsider can find them. The entire arrangement preserves a single lie, that the Chiss have no navigators of their own. The Chiss had found a way to live inside the unknown regions, but they had never found a way to chart them. Their maps died with every Skywalker who aged out, and no amount of secrecy could change that. While the Chiss kept their borders sealed and their capabilities hidden, the Republic was running into the same wall from the other side. Surveys and probe missions sent towards the western reaches over the centuries returned incomplete data or nothing useful. The few Jedi scouts who did push past the border, including the one who discovered Ilum by following a resonance in the Force, relied on abilities no survey team could replicate. By the time Joruus C'baoth proposed his expedition, the Republic's record in the unknown regions was a long list of dead ends. In the Legends novel Outbound Flight, C'baoth convinced the Republic Senate and Chancellor Palpatine to fund a project unlike anything the galaxy had tried before. They launched 6 dreadnought warships linked around a central supply core, carrying thousands of colonists and crew, aimed through the unknown regions and from there towards another galaxy. The Jedi Council was divided on the mission. Most members thought it was too ambitious and doubted C'baoth's judgment, but C'baoth pushed the mission through on the strength of his reputation and Palpatine's public backing. He framed the expedition as exploration and colonization, with a secondary goal of finding a Jedi named Vergir who had gone missing in the far reaches of space. Palpatine's public backing for the mission covered a very different agenda. As Darth Sidious, the future Emperor viewed C'baoth as a Jedi with enough influence and ambition to interfere with the Sith's long-term plans. Outbound Flight offered a clean solution, which was to send C'baoth and every Jedi he could recruit into the unknown regions, then make sure none of them came back. Sidious dispatched his agent, Kinman Doriana, along with a Trade Federation battle group carrying thousands of droid starfighters to intercept the expedition after it left Republic space. But Outbound Flight crossed into Chiss territory before the ambush fleet could reach it, and the first person to find the expedition was not Doriana, but Thrawn. At this point in the Legends timeline, Thrawn was still a commander in the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet, years away from exile, and the arrival of 6 Republic dreadnoughts in Chiss space demanded a response. 6 warships carrying thousands of people could be the explorers or the forward edge of an invasion, and Thrawn treated the situation accordingly. When Doriana's Trade Federation battle group arrived shortly after with its cargo of droid starfighters, Thrawn tore the droid fleet apart in a single action. Doriana's side of the operation was in ruins. Stripped of his military option, Doriana told Thrawn about a threat he called the Far Outsiders. It was an invasion force gathering at the far edge of the galaxy, armed with organic technology and weapons unlike anything the known galaxy had seen. Doriana warned that if Outbound Flight stumbled into their territory, the expedition's people, its data files, and its technology would fall into enemy hands. The invaders would have everything they needed to find and attack the Republic decades ahead of schedule. In later Legends material, the Far Outsiders would be identified as the Yuuzhan Vong, the species from outside the galaxy that eventually invaded the galaxy in the New Jedi Order novel series. Thrawn weighed Doriana's warning, assessed the risk, and destroyed Outbound Flight, killing C'baoth and the vast majority of those aboard. Sidious and Thrawn reached the same conclusion from opposite directions. Sidious wanted C'baoth and his Jedi removed from the board. Thrawn wanted a potential security breach sealed before it could lead the Yuuzhan Vong to the known galaxy or to the Ascendancy. Neither needed the other's permission, and the outcome was the same. The largest exploration mission the Republic had ever sent into the unknown regions ended before it traveled more than a few weeks past the border. Palpatine and the Senate had kept the project quiet from the start, partly over concerns about the costs and partly because no one wanted to advertise that the Republic was pushing colonists into uncharted space. When the expedition launched from Yaga Minor, almost no one at the spaceport noticed it leaving. After its destruction, nobody came to look. The wreckage sat deep in Chiss territory for nearly 50 years. A small number of colonists had survived the attack, sealed inside the remains of the dreadnoughts with no way to signal for help. They had no knowledge of whether anyone in the known galaxy remembered they were there. Their descendants were still alive when Luke and Mara Jade finally reached the crash site decades later. A man named Presser had taken the title of Guardian and built a functioning colony inside the sealed dreadnoughts, complete with governance, families, and children who had never seen the sky. When asked why they had never left, the answer was plain: they had no idea how to get out. In the Legends novel Survivor's Quest, a Chiss diplomat eventually contacted Luke Skywalker through Imperial contacts and offered to return the remains, inviting him to join an expedition to the crash site. Even that gesture came loaded with conditions. The Chiss controlled the schedule, chose the meeting point, and timed the invitation so tightly that no official New Republic delegation could be assembled before the deadline. Outbound Flight's story, from launch to destruction to its quiet rediscovery decades later, traced the same line that ran through every attempt to cross the unknown regions. A ship entered with confidence, ran into a power that had no interest in letting outsiders through, and disappeared so completely that the rest of the galaxy forgot it had ever left. Outbound Flight crossed one border and met one Chiss officer, and that was enough to end it. Deeper inside the chaos, the picture was far more crowded. The unknown regions were full of civilizations, warlords, and predators locked in wars that rewrote borders and displaced entire species without a single record reaching the core. The Ascendancy trilogy spends 3 novels revealing just how many of those conflicts were burning at the same time. The most dangerous enemy the Chiss faced during this era was a warlord called General Yiv the Benevolent, the leader of a conquering alliance called the Nakardan Destiny. Yiv worked quietly, absorbing smaller nations one at a time, installing puppet governments, and building a network of military bases and listening posts that stretched across the chaos. His path led directly toward the Ascendancy's borders. Some of the systems Yiv targeted were natural fortresses, wrapped in electromagnetic storms so strong that only 2 or 3 safe hyperspace approaches existed. Ancient meteor fields had seeded the inner system, cutting inbound lanes down to a handful of narrow corridors. Thrawn identified Yiv's operation before the rest of the Chiss leadership took it seriously, tracked his movements across multiple star systems, and eventually captured him after a fleet battle over the Vok home world of Crimea. The Nakardan dynasty fell apart almost immediately, with Yiv's subordinate captains scrambling to carve up whatever territory they could grab before someone stronger took it from them. The wars and the chaos left wreckage that went far past broken ships. In the Ascendancy trilogy, Thrawn encountered the Magus, the spiritual leader of a species whose home world had been torn apart by a civil war engineered by outside forces. 200 survivors had escaped on a single ship, fleeing along a random vector with their government's computers demolished and no destination in mind. The Magus wanted her surviving people to die together rather than live displaced from the ruined planet, a request Thrawn refused. She later sensed a former Chiss Skywalker's lost connection to the Force and linked it to her own people's concept of the Beyond, a Force tradition with no connection to the Jedi or the Sith. The Magus and her people were one example among hundreds scattered across the chaos, civilizations ground down by wars they had no part in starting. In Legends, nomadic raiders called the Vagari stripped entire systems bare and moved on before anyone could respond, proving that the civilizations inside the unknown regions were building weapons and tactics the known galaxy had never seen. But the Nakardan were only the visible layer. The Ascendancy trilogy slowly reveals that a far more powerful group had been pulling strings behind nearly every major conflict in the region. The Grisks, identified by name in the trilogy's 3rd book, work through agents and proxies rather than open fleets. Their primary operative, a figure called Jixtus, directed the Nakardan campaigns from the shadows. He pointed to another civilization, the Kil'jae'lumin, at targets the Grisks wanted softened. He sent a team of cultural manipulators called the Agbui into the heart of the Ascendancy to stir the Chiss ruling families towards civil war from the inside. Jixtus never showed his face, wearing a hood, a veil, and gloves at all times. His allies and proxies never learned what species he was until the final confrontation. He is revealed to be a Grisk, the agent of power that preferred to break civilizations apart before moving in to collect what was left. Jixtus told one of his proxies that the Chiss had proven they could resist outside attack and internal manipulation separately, and that only a combination of both at the same time would bring them down. The Grisk's own warships powerful enough to destroy anything in the chaos. Jixtus described one vessel, the Fate Spinner, as capable of turning an entire battle fleet to scrap in 2 hours. In a region where no one could keep reliable track of borders, alliances, or fleet movements, a hidden power could move freely without anyone connecting the pieces until the damage was already done. The people caught in the middle of all these wars had their own way of coping. It centered on the same problem every civilization in the Chaos faced from the day it launched its first ship. The Navigators Guild, introduced earlier as the Chiss Ascendancy's cover for their Skywalkers, served a far larger clientele than just the Chiss. One of the trilogy's recurring characters, a pathfinder named Kilori of Wandualon, navigated using something he called the Great Presence, a kind of external awareness he accessed through a sensory deprivation headset and a deep trance. Even the best pathfinders found the Great Presence unreliable, sometimes generous with its guidance, and sometimes nearly useless. Jixtus understood that better than anyone in the Chaos. In one exchange in the Ascendancy trilogy, he speculated to the Kilori that the Chiss might possess navigational technology brought back from their ancient campaigns in lesser space. He described devices built on the computers and mechanical constructs used by the Sith and the Republic. Kilori's reaction to the idea was immediate. If such a device existed, and if it could be stolen or copied, space travel in the Chaos would open up in a way that had not been possible for thousands of years. The Chiss kept their Skywalkers hidden, the Grisks kept searching for a device they never found, and the Chaos stayed dark. Every power inside the region had reached the same ceiling. Navigation was scarce, routes were temporary, and the civilizations that thrive were the ones that stopped trying to map the space around them and started using its darkness instead. While the civilizations of the Chaos fought over territory they could barely navigate, someone in the known galaxy was watching the region with an interest that went far past curiosity. Emperor Palpatine wanted the unknown regions mapped for his own purposes and nobody else's, and the tool he needed walked out of the Chaos on its own. In the canon novel Thrawn, the Chiss commander Mithra Nuruodo was living in exile on an uninhabited planet at the edge of the unknown regions. An Imperial patrol under Captain Vos Park landed on the surface while chasing smugglers and found him. Park was so struck by the tactical ability Thrawn displayed that he brought the alien back to Emperor Palpatine personally. Thrawn offered information, telling the Emperor that threats were hiding in the unknown regions, threats that would someday find the Empire, and that he was familiar with many of them. Palpatine's interest was immediate, and it ran deeper than military planning. Palpatine kept Thrawn around for his knowledge about crossing the unknown regions, and much of what Thrawn knew went directly into the computers inside a facility on Jakku called the Observatory. In Legends, Palpatine put that knowledge to work immediately. According to Survivor's Quest and the Hand of Thrawn duology, Palpatine sent Thrawn and a task force back into the unknown regions years before the Rebel Alliance even formed. It was officially labeled a punishment for a political misstep, but secretly, he was ordering Thrawn to explore, conquer, and hold new territory for the Empire. Thrawn built what became known as the Empire of the Hand, a network of military installations, shipyards, and laboratories. It was spread across an area so deep in the unknown regions that the Imperial Remnant's leadership on Bastion never learned it existed. At a fortress on a planet called Nirawan, Chiss officers and Imperial personnel worked side by side under Thrawn's command, holding territory and tracking threats the known galaxy had never heard of. An officer at the base identified the territory as Thrawn's network. One of the officers stationed there told a visitor that there were 100 different threats in the unknown regions that would freeze her blood if she knew about them. The Chiss ruling families alone could not stop any of them. The whole operation was the deepest anyone had pushed into the unknown regions in galactic history. In canon, Palpatine's ambitions for the unknown regions took a more personal shape. Buried under the desert on Jakku, the Emperor had built an observatory around a set of ancient computers from a civilization older than the Republic. Rax, the boy Palpatine recruited to oversee the site, did not know whether the machines dated from the Old Republic or the fallen Sith Empire, and he did not care. What he knew was that for decades, those computers had been plotting a route through the unknown regions. The machines were fed by Thrawn's knowledge of the local hyperspace conditions and tested by probe droids launched into the void one at a time. Most of those droids vanished without sending back a single ping. The Empire had tried using crewed ships before the droids, and the results were worse. Some came back empty, their crews gone without explanation. The communications that did return were either so choked with static that nothing could be read, or so incoherent that the only clear takeaway was that whoever sent them had lost their mind. The probe droids were the safer option, and even they disappeared at a rate that made every successful ping a minor event. The ones that survived long enough to transmit clean coordinates contributed to the map, and the computers adjusted, recalculated, and sent another. Palpatine told Rax that the galaxy was his to rule, but that it was only one among many. He described the unknown regions as his personal domain, a place to retreat to if the current order fell apart. Palpatine was convinced that something waited for him out there, some origin of the Force, some dark presence radiating outward from deep inside the region. He called it a signal, one that he alone could hear. Even Vader, his own apprentice, seemed unaware of it. Rax, who had grown up on Jakku and spent years overseeing the observatory's construction under Palpatine's orders, thought the Emperor was chasing an echo of his own obsession. Palpatine heard exactly what he wanted to hear because he needed it to be true, but Palpatine was patient, and before his death at Andor, the observatory's computers finished their work. A route through the unknown regions now existed, and it was the only one of its kind. Palpatine also used the unknown regions for shorter-range operations. In Thrawn alliances, the Emperor sensed a disturbance in the Force at the edge of the unknown regions, centered on a border world called Batuu, and sent Thrawn and Darth Vader together to investigate. The mission tested both men's loyalty while probing whatever had disturbed the Force near the frontier. Batuu sat at the line between explored space and the chaos, and even reaching it required careful navigation through unstable lanes. Every one of Palpatine's efforts pointed toward the same conclusion. He poured decades of computation, irreplaceable alien intelligence, and hundreds of expendable probe droids into charting a single route through the unknown regions. The Emperor controlled more resources than any individual in galactic history, and that was the best he could produce. Palpatine's interest in the unknown regions followed a pattern the Sith had set thousands of years before the Empire existed. Around 5000 BBY, the ancient Sith Empire fought the Republic in what Legends calls the Great Hyperspace War. The Sith lost, and the Republic sacked their home worlds, and the surviving Sith scattered. The Republic's Supreme Chancellor authorized a counter-invasion of the Sith worlds, sending Jedi and Republic fleets to Korriban and the remaining Sith worlds to make sure no remnant of the Empire survived. The counter-invasion was less a war than an extermination. The remaining Sith worlds buckled under famine, disease, and internal fighting, and some communities chose ritual mass suicide rather than face Republic forces. The escaping Sith abandoned all known hyperspace routes and threw themselves into a series of random jumps and blind scouting runs, gambling that the sheer danger of the crossing would stop the Republic from following. One group, led by a Sith Lord who would later be known as the Sith Emperor, gathered what remained and led them on a grueling 20-year journey through uncharted space. The route was unmapped, the destination unknown, and the crossing stretched on for 2 decades before the survivors finally settled on a world the Republic would not find for over 1,000 years. The Sith treated inaccessible space the way other civilizations treated fortresses. Temples, tombs, and weapons caches went into locations that punished anyone who came looking. The more dangerous the approach, the safer the contents. The unknown regions, where hyperspace lanes shifted and sensors failed, offered the most extreme version of that protection. 5,000 years after the Great Hyperspace War, the remnant of Palpatine's empire would retrace the same logic, fleeing into the same kind of uncharted space the ancient Sith had used as cover. The details changed, but the instinct did not. Whatever Palpatine's signal pointed to, he died at Andor before he could follow the route his machines had charted. The destination remained unnamed, and the unknown regions kept that secret from the most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history. The Observatory on Jakku was never a research station. Palpatine built it as an exit. Before the Battle of Andor, While the second Death Star was still under construction, the Emperor summoned Gallius Rax and told him that the time for the contingency might soon arrive. Rax was to return to Jakku, to the observatory he had spent years constructing under Palpatine's direction, and prepare. If the Empire fell, the game board would be broken, and a chosen few would escape into the unknown regions using the route the observatory's computers had charted. Everyone else would be left behind. Palpatine left Rax with a single job, and that was to end the Empire. If Palpatine fell, the government he had built should be broken rather than handed to someone else. Palpatine's reasoning left no room for doubt, and as Rax understood it, an empire that could not protect its emperor had forfeited its right to exist. Rax brought the bulk of the remaining Imperial fleet to Jakku and arranged them for a last stand against the New Republic. He prepared to crack the planet open through the observatory's borehole, a shaft drilled through the crust and mantle all the way down to the core. The only way to reach it was through a corridor lined with Sith relics. A red mask, a white lance, a bloody banner, and a holocron so dark it swallowed light lined the walls, each separated by smooth-faced sentinel droids standing dormant in their chambers. Palpatine had told Rax that Jakku was once green, covered in vegetation, and home to oceans. The surface no longer showed it, but the core still held what the Emperor called a vital spark of life. The borehole reached down to touch it. The chain reaction would have split the world apart and swallowed both armies. The galaxy would be left to scavengers, and the chosen remnant would already be gone. Grand Admiral Ray Sloane, who had spent months trying to unravel Rax's hold on the Imperial military, reached the observatory during the Battle of Jakku and killed him before the plan could finish. She shut down the observatory's self-destruct mechanism. On another part of the battlefield, Nora Wexley sealed a borehole that Rax had opened to the planet's core, finishing what her husband Brenton had started. Together, they saved the planet and everyone fighting on and above it. But Sloane did not turn the observatory's secrets over to the New Republic. In his final moments, Rax urged her to take his place in the contingency. She was to bring Commandant Brendol Hux, his young son Armitage, and their child soldiers aboard the ship Imperialis and follow the computed route to a rendezvous deep in the unknown regions. Before the battle was even over, a handful of Imperial captains broke formation, entered coordinates nobody in the New Republic fleet recognized, and jumped their ships out of the Jakku system one after another. From the New Republic's perspective, the ships aimed at empty space, accelerated to light speed, and were gone. The New Republic logged the disappearances as suicidal because nothing came back to contradict that reading. There weren't any distress calls or pieces of wreckage on any scanner, just empty space where Imperial warships had been a moment earlier. Sloane knew where these ships were headed. She boarded the Imperialis with the Huxes and the children, let a sentinel droid take the controls, and began the crossing. The journey took months, and what Sloane described along the way reads like a catalog of everything that makes the unknown regions lethal. The sentinel droid navigated in short hyperspace jumps, each one a calculated leap through shifting lanes. Along the way, Sloane described skirting superstorms, losing all system power for hours after a magnetic burst of unknown origin swept through the ship, and seeing strange creatures drifting in the blackness between the stars. During the hours without power, Sloane had no navigation and no guarantee the systems would come back. She traveled the entire crossing with broken ribs from an injury she took on Jakku, and every jump sent pain through her side that she could not treat until the journey ended. The path Sloane was following was the safest available, and it was still dangerous enough that anyone without the droid to guide them would not have lasted a week. The route was survivable, but knowing where it led, or how to turn it back if the droid failed, was not. At the end of the crossing, the Eclipse was waiting. The Super Star Destroyer had quietly dropped off Imperial tracking systems before the Battle of Jakku. Its records ended abruptly with no sign of attack or damage, listed as destroyed in a report that did not match any known battle. Palpatine had sent it ahead as part of the contingency, prepositioned in the unknown regions for exactly the moment when the Empire's survivors would need somewhere to go. Sloane ordered the Sentinel to bring the Imperialis in. She later reflected that she and the others aboard were pioneers, the first from the known galaxy to live outside its charted boundaries. With her were Brendol Hux, who would help to build the First Order's military, and his son Armitage, a boy who had grown sharper and more vicious with every month in transit. The empire that Palpatine created and Rax tried to bury was gone. Sloane saw a chance to build something different in a region where the New Republic could not follow. The people aboard the Imperialis and the Eclipse held the only charted passage out of known space, and no one in the New Republic knew it existed. For the first time in the history of the unknown regions, a faction from the known galaxy had not just crossed the barrier, but settled behind it. Over the next 30 years, the Imperial Remnant would put its head start to use, drawing on the same navigational scarcity and regional concealment that every prior power in the chaos had relied on. The Imperial Remnant that became the First Order spent 3 decades building in silence, using the route Palpatine's Observatory had computed and the Imperialis had transmitted to other fleeing ships. The survivors pushed deeper into the unknown regions. They seized underdeveloped worlds to serve as shipyards, mining sites, and staging grounds. The New Republic, focused on cutting its military and governing the known galaxy, had no idea any of it was happening. The First Order built a new generation of warships, including Resurgent-class Star Destroyers nearly twice the size of the old Imperial models, and raised a new army from scratch. Through a program called Project Resurrection, the First Order took children, thousands of them abducted from outlying star systems, and trained them as soldiers who had never known any other life. An entire military power grew in the dark, on worlds no chart in the known galaxy could find. The canon novel Bloodline places the formal adoption of the name First Order at roughly 6 years before the destruction of the Hosnian system, though the military buildup had been running for far longer. The sharpest symbol of what the First Order built in hiding was Starkiller Base. The planet Ilum, an ice world in the unknown regions, had been sacred to the Jedi for thousands of years. Jedi younglings traveled there to harvest kyber crystals for their lightsabers, in a rite of passage that dated back to the earliest days of the Order. The Jedi had kept Ilum's location a close secret, reachable only by a hyperspace route mapped through Force-sensitive navigation. The Empire began digging into Ilum's kyber deposits during the Imperial era. The First Order continued the excavation for 30 years, carving a trench around the planet's middle into a superweapon powered by the kyber crystalline core at its center. A world the Jedi had guarded as sacred became a weapon capable of wiping out star systems. The First Order also relied on the region's oldest navigational resource. According to the Force Awakens visual dictionary, the First Order recruited Force-sensitive navigators to help its ships travel through the chaos, mirroring the method the Chiss Ascendancy had used for centuries. When the First Order fired Starkiller Base and destroyed the Hosnian system, an entire government and its home fleet vanished in a single afternoon, hit from a direction nobody had been watching. The conditions that kept the unknown regions dark have never changed. The lanes still shift, the barriers still hold, and every computer, fleet, and government that has tried to chart a lasting path has failed. The factions that punched through, from the Chiss to the Sith to the remnant that became the First Order, kept the way private. In a region that erases every route the moment a ship passes through, permanence is the one thing nobody has ever been able to build. Mapping is how governments claim space, and the unknown regions erased every claim as fast as it was made. The unknown regions are not a blank spot on the map waiting to be filled in. They're a locked room, and every key that exists is in someone's pocket. Tens of thousands of years separate the fall of the Rakata from the rise of the First Order, and across all that time, the western half of the galaxy has never been charted. The Chiss navigated with children whose abilities fade before adulthood. The Sith fled into it and vanished for 1,000 years. Palpatine spent decades computing a single route and died before he could walk it. The region earned its name long before anyone in the Republic thought to give it one, and nothing in the centuries since has brought it any closer to the light. Quick note before you go, members get early access and a few videos that stay off the main channel. If that's interesting, the link is in the description. Otherwise, here's another video about traveling beyond the Outer Rim that you might like.